I'm still processing everything. Today on Readus Reviews, I review Godzilla, King of the Monsters, the sequel to the 2014 film directed by Gareth Edwards, and the third installment in Legendary Pictures and Warner Brothers' Kaiju Universe series. Because it sounds a lot better than Monsterverse. I'm just saying. It's been 5 years since Godzilla's bout with the Mutos in San Francisco, and Monarch is saying big doo-doo this time. Not only does the government want them to kill any and all kaiju known as Titans in this universe, but thanks to the actions of a terrorist organization, Godzilla's old rival, Ghidorah himself, has been awakened along with a slew of other kaiju. So just like he did 5 years prior, it's up to Godzilla to restore balance by challenging Ghidorah and stopping his reign of terror. So as far as the story is concerned, the only thing familiar that I could find about the overall story was that certain elements of it reminded me of the good plot beats of Transformers: Revenge of the Fallen. With that being said, the story wasn't necessarily the strongest one in the world, but it got the job done as far as giving a valid reason why everything that happens in this movie happens. Like, considering what we've learned about Monarch from both Godzilla 2014 and Kong Skull Island, the story that's presented to us in King of the Monsters is pretty much the natural next step. It was just eh. Like, I'm absolutely sure that this is just the first time in a long time for me that I've been exposed to a story/plot in a movie that doesn't necessarily stand on its own 2 feet, but instead relies on the characters to make it unique, both human and kaiju alike. With that being said, let's talk about the characters that stood out to me the most, starting with Dr. Serizawa. So one of the main complaints that I had about Godzilla 2014 was how it misused 2 of its best actors in its cast, Bryan Cranston and Ken Watanabe. Well, they couldn't use Bryan Cranston anymore for obvious reasons, but they sure as hell redeemed themselves with their use of Serizawa-sensei. His role was bigger and broader, he felt more like a main character than he did in Godzilla 2014, and his actions and decisions left a huge yet positive impact on the narrative overall. It was really well done. Millie Bobby Brown gave an excellent performance as Madison and was definitely one of the actors along with Watanabe that helped make the overall story feel as grand as it aimed to be. Like, I could see and feel the conflict every time she was on screen and had to make a moral decision, and I could sense her level of conviction both in her own beliefs and in calling others out. Vera Farmiga's Emma definitely gave off heavy vibes of Annette Birkin from Resident Evil 2 to me, both in personality and in motivation to a certain extent. That being said, I did appreciate about everything regarding her arc, including how it finished considering her overall role in the story. And out of the 2 parents to Millie's Madison, she was definitely the more enjoyable of the 2 to watch, which I'll get to in a minute. Godzilla was just as fun to watch in this as it was in 2014. As a fan of how they handled the suspense of his bouts in the first movie, I was afraid that seeing him get more fight screen time would take away from the wonder of it all, but I'm glad to know that I was definitely wrong in that regard. Mothra was, is, and always will be that bitch. Like, the way they handled her in this movie was pretty much on par with how she's handled in the Toho movies. Some might say a little bit too on par with how she's handled in the Toho movies. And her overall look was her overall look was just so great. And then there's Ghidorah, who, holy shit was Ghidorah intimidating. I also like that one of the newer things that they added with this movie was that each of his heads had their own distinct personalities. I thought that was a nice touch. And then Rodan. Look, I'm just gonna be honest. Rodan has always been a jobber, real talk. So it's good to see that he stayed true to form in this movie. Another thing that I liked about this movie was that there was a really nicely placed Easter egg that was a nod to the original 1954 Godzilla in the form of a plot device that I thought was very nicely handled. And then, of course, there's just there's just the cinematography. Holy shit, the cinematography in this was great. Like, one of the main things that I loved about Godzilla 2014 was how Gareth Edwards showed the scale of the monsters and used the beautifully eerie imagery to show, like, the gravity of the situation, like the Halo jump scene in the first movie. And I'm glad to say that almost every scene involving the monsters captured that same exact imagery, and I loved every minute of it. And while I would have liked to have heard a lot more of that eerie choir in the background in some of the tracks, like in Godzilla 2014, hearing the way that they used Godzilla and Mothra's Toho theme into the soundtrack was perfect. And honestly, outside of what I stated before, the only other dislikes I have were certain characters and how they were handled, like the use of Charles Dance's Jonah, for example. Or as he will forever be known to me as my dear brother Numsi from The Golden Child. Yes, I know that Game of Thrones is the most relevant reference, but fuck you. What's sad is that considering that the narrative of the Kaiju universe is hinting that he's going to be the main human villain of this entire thing, they sure as fuck didn't give him a lot to do in this. And I'm not just talking about his actions either, he's barely fleshed out in this movie. They only briefly touch on his motivations, but not enough for us to get engaged with him. And considering how huge in scale this movie is, I felt that misuse was a tad bit disappointing. And then there's Kyle Chandler as Mark Russell, aka the main human protagonist. And he was just so fucking boring. His development is rushed very early on in the form of a backstory summary, and how he's portrayed makes it hard for us to care about his gripe with the kaiju in the first place. Like, the only thing that saved him from being a complete snooze fest is one pivotal scene he shares with Watanabe. Like, seriously, when it comes to the human protagonists in the two good American Godzilla movies, Aaron Taylor Johnson's Fort Brody in Godzilla 2014 can easily run laps around this guy. Yes, I made that Quicksilver reference on purpose. Fight me, bitch. Which is sad, because considering Kyle's character is in a universe where King Kong exists, you'd think that he learned how to be interesting in a monster movie after being in a Peter Jackson movie starring King Kong. Like, how the fuck do you fuck that up, bruh? Readers, Godzilla King of the Monsters may not be perfect, but it is one hell of a time. What the story lacks in strength, it makes up for in human characterization, monster fights, beautifully eerie cinematography, and artistry. If you enjoy just Godzilla 2014, only the Toho films, or both, you'll for sure get a kick out of this movie. And while I'd understand if you decide to catch it in a matinee, I would definitely say it's worth a full admittance ticket price and a Blu-ray purchase for me for sure. So with that being said, readers, your homework assignment for the day. Write in the comments section below what you thought of Godzilla King of the Monsters if you've seen it. If you want to help financially support the channel, you can join my Patreon by clicking the card at the end of the video or in the link in the description down below, where you can also find a link to my merchandise store. Or if you prefer to give a one-time donation, you can find links to my PayPal and my Ko-fi account in the description box as well. Also, make sure you subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications, because I post new videos every Monday, Wednesday, and every other Friday. But until then, this is Readus 101. Class dismissed.